And we're live. Guys, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Let's Talk Fishing podcast. Let's Talk Fishing podcast is brought to you by Grant Rods, Crusher Lures, and of course the American Bass Club. Tonight, I'd like to welcome a young man who's a collegiate bass angler from my home state of Illinois, so that's very close to my heart. A guy by the name of Drew Gill. How you doing tonight, Drew?
I'm doing good, Jay. How are you?
I'm doing very good. Drew, before the show, we were talking a little bit about how you like to fish schooling bass that are schooled up on shad balls. Why don't we talk a little bit about that? What is your go-to presentation when you're targeting those kind of fish?
So when I'm fishing for suspended bass, like we're talking about your standard suspended bass fishery. So we're talking about Dale Hollow, we're talking about Table Rock, Bull Shoals, the Herring Lakes, any of those major like suspended fish fisheries, and even your local lakes. Most of your local lakes that get water clarity past 2 feet, there's going to be times of the year where your bass are going to set up on bait. They're going to set up suspended. A lot of the time they'll be over the river channel, or they'll be suspending over the top. Say you got standing timber. They like to relate to standing timber, but it just depends on the depth of the fish. That's like a big part of what I'm going to talk about is like based on where the fish set up in the water column, and we're talking about on forward-facing sonar. Based on where your fish set up in the water column is going to change the way you fish for these fish. So I'm going to kind of start from the top down. So the reason I want to talk about this bite, this is a bite I've made a lot of money on. Finished, had a lot of top 25s, a couple top 10s on, and recently finished third in the Toyota Series Championship at Guntersville last week and made 40 grand on. So this a near and dear topic right now.
Okay, what trail was that?
That was the Toyota Series Championship. So that was what was the Costa Trail.
Wow. And how many competitors?
There were 195 qualified for that tournament from the Toyota Series.
195. You came in first.
Correct? Third.
Okay, you came in third. Still.
Third. Yeah. Kyle Hall.
I wanted to make that very clear.
Robinson, Marshall. Do what?
I wanted to make that very clear that you came in third. And how old are you?
I'm 20.
You're 20 years old.
20 years old, so I'm a junior. Yep.
Congratulations, young man.
Thank you, sir.
But I'm saying that with the utmost of respect because I never even came close to that fishing the BFL. So, congratulations.
I appreciate it. It's been a whirlwind the last week, for sure.
I bet it has. No wonder Hunter had recommended you. My goodness. Woo. Well, now that I've just interrupted you, completely ruined your train of thought.
Good. So when we're talking about fishing for suspended bass, we're really talking about a section of the water column. So these fish are all setting up above the bottom, not relating to some piece of cover. So like suspending bass are fish that are generally pelagic, meaning they don't have really a home. They're just swimming around purely keying on bait. And so starting from the top, we're talking about fish in most of your fisheries. Say you've got a fishery with the water clarity of, let's say a Lake Guntersville or a Pickwick. Well, most of the TVA lakes like a 2 to 3 foot visibility. You're going to have a lot of fish that are going to set up in 0 to 8 feet of water generally. They're going to set up pretty high where the light penetration is the highest because most of your bait's going to set up generally pretty high in those fisheries. And so whenever I can get around fish that are shallower than, say, 6, 7, 8 feet or shallower, this is always going to be my go-to when the water's warmer than even 50 degrees. This is the big sexy dog. So it's the hard knot version. It's chrome. So like it is a big, loud, aggressive topwater. And whenever I get around those shallower fish, those fish that are set up really high, basically when we're talking about the water column with suspended bass, generally speaking, in your more stained fisheries, the higher a fish is set up, the more aggressive it is. So if I can throw a really aggressive presentation like a topwater, generally speaking, if you match up the bass to the presentation you're using, and like if I can get around those really aggressive fish and throw them a really aggressive bait, my catch percentage is going to be a lot higher than throwing, say, something that's a little bit more methodical or steady, like a swim bait or something like that. It's a really aggressive fish. generally speaking, I'm going to get more bites on the topwater. And that's kind of what has happened for me lately on Dale Hollow's my home lake right now. And it happened a lot at Gunnersville too, where these fish are setting up really high in the water. And when they do that, and you can target them with your forward facing sonar and you can get their attention with a topwater, if you can get them to come up, your cast to bite ratio on these fish is close to 100%.
Really?
Like almost 100% of the time, you are going to bite. I did it on Bay Springs Lake as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we recently had a college event down there, and I had a top 25 there doing this. Fish were really bass time bait. And when we're talking about cleaner fisheries, when you start getting into the Dale Hollows, Cumberlands, Lanier, Hartwell, Table Rock, Bull Shoals, we're going to start working our way down the water column. So, like, you're going to start seeing a lot of fish setting up in your 8 to 12 to even down to 15 and 20. And that's kind of your mid-depth water column fish, which is where this bait is going to become a really big part of my arsenal. And like this is an all year thing with a jerk bait and suspended bass. I will have a jerk bait like this one. This is a Lucky Craft pointer. I'm going to have this one tied on fishing for suspended fish in that depth range all year. Doesn't matter if the water's 90, doesn't matter if the water's 35. And basically, I'm going to start targeting a lot of fish, call them your strike. Have to get a little further down to reach. And so, you know, the jerk bait still has a very similar action. It throws a lot of flash. Yeah. It's got rattles in it, but the big part's a flash. And so what you're trying to do with suspended bass is you're trying to get them to come up to your. When a suspended bass can come up to your presentation, your percent done this on a lot of fisheries. And generally speaking, when fish are set at 8 to 12 to even 15 foot water range, your cast rate of cast of the most of the somewhere between 2/3 of them to bite. Jerk bait.
Say, Drew? Drew, can you hear me? Drew? Can you hear me, Drew? Drew? If you can hear me, get closer to your Wi-Fi. Darn it. Can you hear me, Drew? I'm sorry about this, guys. You know, we sometimes have problems with Wi-Fi. It's not on my end, it's on Drew's end. And, you know, he's probably, it looks like he might be in a college dorm room. Should have pretty good Wi-Fi. But I don't think he can hear me at all. I'm trying to get him currently to go closer to his Wi-Fi. Drew is just coming off of a third place finish in a Toyota Series event. It looks like he's going to try, you know, maybe resetting his. Oh shoot! Well, it looks like he might try to resetting his. I can't hear you. He just said, "There he is." Can you hear me, Drew?
Oh, I can hear you.
Good.
I can hear you.
Good.
Okay.
I'm very happy that you can hear me. So Drew, you were talking. The last thing we heard, you were starting to talk about jerk baits.
Okay. So with jerk bait fishing, with fishing like baits like this pointer, I'm fishing for mostly fish in that 8 to 12 to 15, even down to 20 depth range. And when you get these fish to come up to this bait, or say a swim bait too, your percentage cast to catch on your forward facing sonar is generally going to be 50 to 75% on this bait. If you get a bait below a fish that's suspended, your cast to catch rate probably drops below 1 in 10.
Oh
Like
man,
these bass are feeding up. bass that are suspended are always looking up. Like you might see them on your screen, you might see them dive down through bait or something like that. But when they're feeding on single bait, like your jerk bait is going to imitate, or swim bait, or even an Alabama rig, like an Alabama rig's a big bait for this sort of deal.
Oh
They're
yeah.
always looking up. They're always looking up. And so if you let that bait get below them, what they're doing is they're gonna follow it. So here's your bait. They're gonna follow it up, and when your bait drops below them, they're gonna go over your bait and get a better look at it. And generally speaking, I don't know if it's that they see the line, if it's that they get too good a look at it up close, but they rarely ever bite if you let your bait get below them.
Okay,
And
let
so
me
like
ask you a
that's
question about this. So when you're out there in
yeah.
the main basin of the lake, are you looking for shad balls, or are you looking for just single fish?
So it depends on your fishery. Most of the time, the cleaner the lake, the more I am looking for bait. And it
Okay.
just depends on your fishery. Like there's really barren lakes. Like
Yes.
an example of a really barren, clean water lake would probably be like Norfolk Lake in Arkansas. Is one of
Yes,
those that's
Norfolk.
just
I've
it
been
doesn't
there.
have a lot.
Or Table Rock. Geez, all those lakes.
Mm-hmm. And like Table Rock has a lot of bait. Norfolk doesn't have as much. And so really what I'm looking for in most of your clean water reservoirs is bait, because most of your life in those fisheries is going to revolve around the bait. But the thing about bait is on those lakes, it's almost always over the river channel. Like when you pull up your charts, 90% of the time, you're going to be fishing bait that's over the river channel, and the other 10% of the time, it's going to be over some sort of creek channel. But your bait always revolves around the river channel. Even in fisheries with no current, for some reason, they still know the river channel's there. And so I'm going to run around. I don't know how much you've ever done this. This is something that I learned from Zona talks about it up north on the Great Lakes, is using 2D on pad. And if you turn on your 2D and you run around on pad, I will zigzag over the river channel until I run it. If I think that I have the conditions for doing this, I'm going to zigzag the river channel looking for bait. And then once I start seeing it pop up on my screen, I'm going to turn right back around. I'm going to zigzag over that area again. And basically, I'm just going to keep dropping dots on my unit until I kind of corner in where most of the bait's living. Because generally, the bait in your fisheries is moving in rafts. Like it's going to be in a half-mile section every 8 to 10 miles of the river channel. There's going to be a lot of bait in like a half-mile section. And that's kind of where you're going to want to start your search on the cleaner fisheries. Versus when you get in more fisheries, your fish are still going to relate to the river a little bit and the creek channels a little bit, but it's a little bit less bait oriented. Your fish are going to roam more. There's going to be a lot more single fish not around bait, like lakes like Bay Springs, lakes like Gunnersville, lakes like Green River Lake in Kentucky. Cherokee can be this way, where there's just not as much. There's not as much bait in those fisheries as there is in the cleaner fisheries, and so your fish are going to tend to roam a lot more because of that stained water. The bait doesn't get up high, it doesn't get as tight, and so the fish tend to roam around more, and so you fish for singles a lot. Where you're going to look on your forward-facing sonar around, you're going to see one fish swimming. Generally, if it's singles, 0 to 10 feet, and that's when you kind of get in the bed fishing scenario almost of you're looking at them, and it's just you are just pestering that fish until he bites.
Okay, let me ask you another question. So you find an area. It's a big area, 25 feet deep. You've got massive shad balls that you can see busting the surface. You don't even need your sonar. You know right where they are. So you would start out with a really shiny surface lure, correct?
Yeah. So when I'm fishing bait that's set up at the surface, we're talking water warmer than like 55 degrees, 50, 55. I'm going to start with something that's really aggressive and pretty shallow. So not necessarily
So something like a spook
water.
or like that thing you watched or like that thing you showed earlier.
Yeah. A spook is a good bait for that. When they're set up really high, I like throwing a big swim bait. You can throw a glide bait. You can throw a shallow crankbait. Like just something that's really aggressive and is
How-
gonna draw a bite from the most
something like
aggressive
this?
bass. That can work. It just depends. Generally your topwaters like ploppers come into play a lot whenever your bait starts moving into creeks. Like we start getting bait up high in the creek, that's when a plopper is a bait that I will lean to sometimes, just because it causes a lot of commotion. It causes the shad to break up at the surface, and most of the time,
Sure
what's
does.
happening is there's a school of bait at the surface, and there's 1, 2, 3 bass that are just right under it, just waiting for something to happen.
You know, the guy
And
I
that
was fishing
plopper,
with I was fishing this exact scenario a couple weeks ago, where they had a channel going out of the lake. The river channel came really close to this channel that went out of the lake, and there were just 5 or 6 shad balls in this small area. And my buddy says, we were both using, shad wrap, not shad wraps. We were using rattle traps, and a boat came through right through the middle of the shad schools, and he said, cast right in back of that, because anything that breaks up that school will cause a bite. And I didn't know that. I fished this scenario. Well, you know where I'm from, and we fished a lot of the same lakes, and I never knew that. It's just, the old timers have been doing it for 40, 50 years. They know that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it really does just depend on that. The boat disturbance thing is something that really happens a lot in the fall. I don't know why it's such a big deal in the fall, but generally in the fall, you start seeing a more positive reaction to really, really aggressive happenings in the ecosystem. Like when you get boats drive through, or you get gigantic schools of bait that get fed on by birds, or even like you could get aquatic reptiles feeding on it. You can get, I've seen snakes and turtles feed on schools of shad. It's really weird. And like the bass, any sort of disturbance in the ecosystem in the fall around bait generally will cause bass to react positively.
Interesting. So when would you use a jerk bait through shad schools or for suspending bass?
So the jerk bait is going to come into play for me more whenever the water is cooler, but also when the water gets really warm. So when my water is 80 plus degrees, what I'm going to do is, instead of your standard twitch, pause, retrieve you have in the winter, I'm going to get angry with it. Like I'm going to crack that jerk bait many times in a row before even stopping it. And when I stop it, it's going to be for half a second, and I'm going to get right back after it.
One of the things I thought was crazy is I hear what you said. In colder water, you have a less aggressive presentation with a jerkbait. But I saw Hank Cherry winning the Bassmaster Classic at Guntersville in March, and he's
yeah, he was cracking it.
He was freaking burning that thing, just like he's burning it. And I'm like, but you're not. Wait a minute, I can't argue with success. This guy just won the Bassmaster Classic doing this. One of my favorite presentations, which is a 2-mile long riprap shoreline. Oh my gosh, that's like 90% of my guiding was done on that exact shore, not on that shoreline, but shorelines just like it on other lakes. You look like the nuclear power lakes in Illinois. That's all they are is riprap.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get excited.
When Hank won that tournament, no, you're good. When Hank won that tournament at Gill, he won it on Browns Creek Bridge, which is a place that just has a tremendous population of bass. And he did something which is what you're always looking out in the fishing scenario for all our viewers that are big tournament fishermen. They understand, like, when you win an event, yes, there's times a year where the way the tournament's going to be won. But major events like that, when you on something that's unique, something that you're doing something similar, what you should be doing, like that time of year, you should be throwing a jerk bait, you should be throwing a bait, but he did it a little bit different. And sometimes, yes, we know that doing it different than the way you should do it, a lot of times with bass fishing, it doesn't work out. There's a reason we do things the way we do it, but when it does work out, you almost always have it to yourself, and that's what happened in that tournament.
Well, I mean to interrupt you right now because we have a comment from one of our viewers, a guy named Cajun Rob, who's a great friend of the Let's Talk Fishing podcast. Cajun Rob lives in southern Kentucky, fishes a lot of the lakes that you've been talking about, like a lot of the lakes of eastern Tennessee. He fishes them all. And he's primarily a co-angler. He says fishing as a co, if my boater is fishing a spook type bait, he says a pop-ar, I'm fishing a pop-ar behind him. That has been money for me. And he says, great tips, Drew. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, throwing a smaller topwater behind somebody throwing a big topwater a lot of times can just be absolutely money. I've seen it happen on the herring lakes, especially. There's a big thing with like a front runner too, where you have like that little piece of balsa up in front behind, or right in front of the big topwater. Is the big topwater is so effective because it calls fish, but sometimes it's not as effective at getting them to bite. And so when you call a fish up with it, and you can follow people up with a smaller topwater, a lot of times that's what it takes to get fish that are really pressured to commit. But yep, that's my shallow and mid-depth approach most of the time. And this is just general rules. Obviously, we're talking about bass. Bass don't always follow the rules. And so when bass don't follow the rules, this is a bait I always keep on the front deck from 0 to I catch them at Dale and Table Rock in 60, 65 feet of water on this bait. And this is just a hollow body swim bait. It's a 4.5 inch Shadowlicious. A half
now, who makes that?
And this bait.
Who makes that, Drew?
Strike King. Strike King makes this bait.
Okay.
Strike King. Yep. So it's the Shadowlicious. It's a hollow body. And there's a lot of companies that make hollow bodies. I mean, Bass Tricks makes some. True Bass makes some. Scottsboro makes some hollow body swim baits, as well as Berkeley and Zoom. But my go-to is that Strike King Shadowlicious, because the Shadowlicious, when you're talking about a hollow body swim bait, what you're focusing on is when you have like a Kitech or a Rage swimmer, this is the action. You have tail kick. That's kind of your focus, is that tail's going to kick, but that's pretty well it. With a hollow body swim bait, you want body roll. You want that whole body of that swim bait to roll back and forth. So like with this bait, when this bait's moving through the water, it is rolling like this. The whole bait is rolling, and what happens is that when you get a bait like this that has like this bait has a two-tone color, so it's got a black back, darker back with a clear middle, and it's got those shiny eyes. And what happens is when you get that roll, you get a lot of color change and you get a lot of shine in just that movement right there without the tail kick. And the tail's back there doing this. It's a lot more like this, but like the whole body's rocking, the tail's kicking, and it throws a lot of flash. And so it's really, really good for suspended bass because they are purely keying on shad or herring, alewife, whatever your forage species is that has them out there. They're focusing on bait. And so when you throw something that has a lot of flash like that, that bait is probably the first bait I will pick up all year. I've catch them in 36, 37 degree water on that bait, and I've caught them in 92. And that bait will stay on my front deck when fishing for suspended bass. As shallow as I caught most of my weight at Guntersville last week. I had 13 and a half pounds on day one, and then I had almost 20 on day two and almost 20 on day three. And I caught 90% of weight on that bait. And that is effective. Like I close to my fish that week in 4, 5, 6 feet of water. Like I was burning it. Like you just get after it up shallow and scream it past their face as a reaction bite. But you can slow it down. Like in the wintertime when these fish suspend deeper on like timber and when they suspend on deep groups of bait and ditches, you can slow that bait and just let it wobble, and it catches a lot of bass that way. And those are kind of my 3 go-to presentations all year. Like the spook is a little bit more situational, but especially the jerk bait and swim bait. And then I will mix in an Alabama rig, which most people are going to know what an Alabama rig is. 5 wires, 5 swim baits. I mix that in whenever the water's cooler, whenever they're deeper. And I'll also mix in a Demiki rig. Now, a Demiki rig, I didn't happen to have one line.
Now, what do you do when you go to Wisconsin with the Alabama rigs? Oh, shoot. It looks like we might have lost Drew again. This is not fun. Anyways, guys, we were talking about suspended fish. We were going to talk about several other categories, but I mean, I'm fascinated by the way he's approaching this the suspended water bite. It's fascinating to me, because suspended fish have always been such a mystery to me. I know how to get them. I know how to get them with rattle traps. I know how to get them with jerk baits, but this guy's throwing Alabama rigs, all kinds of things. Drew will probably be back here in a minute. He came back pretty quickly last time that this happened. It's just what we're having here is a connectivity problem, with the Wi-Fi. StreamYard isn't the best when it comes to connectivity. You have to have very, very good Wi-Fi. And a lot of people think they have very good Wi-Fi, but I guess you don't have StreamYard. I don't understand why StreamYard is this way, but I guess they are. Problem is I can't seem to find a better application to use for my podcasts. And I really want to hear what Drew has to say, because Drew is doing such a good job of breaking this down here. He'll probably be back here in a minute. This is what happened last time. Now that I have 5 people listening. If you have any comments, guys, go ahead and comment. I know you're going to say, where the heck's Drew? But we don't want to see Jay. He's ugly. But, Drew will be back here in a minute. I know he will. I have confidence in that. He's doing such a good job here. This is really interesting, because just last week I was fishing a small club event, and this is exactly what we were doing. We were targeting schooling bass over 25 feet of water who were, up feeding on shad balls. And I wish I would have known. I had 3 Alabama rigs in my tackle bag. And here he is. He's much more interesting than I am. Add the stream. Let's put Drew in the forefront. Welcome back, Drew. Drew? Well, I can see him, but I can't hear him. Anyways, Drew's... Are you there? Man, he moved. Or maybe I'm just imagining that. Drew's currently going to school in Mount Carmel, Illinois. He's fished a lot of the same lakes I have, Illinois being my home state. There he is. Can you hear me, Drew? Man, what a teaser. That's what we say in the Bassin Magazine podcast. Brad Gill and I, we say that technical difficulties has become our brand. If it wasn't for bad luck, I tell you what, we had no luck at all. Drew actually had some pretty good luck recently when he scored a 3rd place finish, netting him $40,000 at a Toyota Series event. And I said, 195 entries and Drew comes in 3rd. I told him, you realize that means that 193 of those guys, 192 of them. Geez, I can't even do math anymore. I guess I'm a little flustered with this technical difficulty we're having here. But 192 of them went back, and Drew beat them. Drew being 20 years old. Wow. I said, congratulations, young man. I never even came close to that. And I never fished a tournament with 190 some entry, contestants on it. Probably 60, 70 at BFL was as most as I ever fished, even at the super tournaments. But I never took it as far as he did in his short career. So Drew should be back here momentarily. If he's not, we're just going to have to call it quits. But anyways, we're here with Drew Gill. Drew Gill actually is here, and I'm sure he's furiously trying to get back on. We're hoping he comes back on. But if he doesn't, we still had like 25 minutes of him, and he was telling us about fishing suspended bass and, how much success he's had with his fishing suspended bass. His favorite is, of course, top water, when the fish are right up on the surface, busting the shad. Then he likes going a little bit further down. If they're a little bit further down, stuff like jerk baits, Alabama rigs. Then when they're a little bit further down, I'm sure that he also uses crankbaits. I know I have on deeper stuff. Here he is. Add the stream. Can you hear us, Drew?
I can hear
Yay. Hey, I was just talking about you.
you. I'm flattered. Hopefully.
I was just doing a recap. Well, just to make it kind of interesting.
You're
We
good.
went from 5 people listening to us to 3 now because I guess I'm not that interesting. But
Oh, I bet you
anyways,
are. Nobody likes to see technical issues, and I'm sorry about that.
well, you know what? That's what I was just telling the people, that technical issues has become the brand of the Bassin Magazine podcast. And since I am the Bassin Magazine podcaster, it's also my brand. StreamYard isn't the best. You need almost perfect Wi-Fi, and I pay a lot of money for my Wi-Fi just so I can use StreamYard. I mean, it's not that you don't have good Wi-Fi; it's that you don't have perfect Wi-Fi. So I don't look down on anybody for not
Yeah, my
having.
Wi-Fi is. Oh, I mean, technical issues, unfortunately, are the nature
No,
of things like this. It's just how it goes.
we can't do anything about that. But anyways, moving back to it, we have
Yep.
hit the 30-minute mark. Would you please do a couple of shout out? Well, do your shout outs. Talk about your sponsors. Thank people who have been instrumental in your short yet
Absolutely.
very, very successful career.
Absolutely. First of all, I'd like to thank Revelation Machinery and Tanner Arnold. Like, they're my primary sponsor. They've helped me through the Toyotas. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten to fish the Toyota Series this year without them, and are the reason that I got to fish the tournament at Gville last week, and that I'm qualified for the pro circuit this year. So I couldn't do it without them. Precision Sonar, Fast Bass, Arc Rods. I mean, all those companies have helped me tremendously in keeping me. Fast Bass kept me on the water. Precision's given me lots of help on graphs, mounts, brackets, all that stuff. And Arc makes some of the best rods in the industry. They have really tailor-made actions. They have very specific powers to what you need. And so when you start getting further into your tournament career and you really want to get really specific with the way that you fish, Arc's a great way to get scientific with it. I'd also like to thank my girlfriend, my family, my friends, everyone that supported me along the way. I mean, without them, both on the fishing side with the sponsor side and without my family, my friends, and my girlfriend, I couldn't have gotten here. I mean, without everyone standing behind me and supporting me with all the tournament craziness and fishing 20 or 30 events a year, I wouldn't be here.
I would like to make a shout out here too, because Hunter Sales, a professional bass fisherman who fished all 9 opens this year, and he's the Carson Newman head bass coach. He's the one who recommended Drew to come on Let's Talk Fishing podcast. So thank you very much, Hunter. And also thank you, Drew, for taking time out of your busy schedule. For those of you guys, we didn't make this very clear, but Drew is also going to college at this time. And he fished. Oh, darn it. But you know what? We got his shout outs. So anyways, Drew is going to college at this time. There you are. Are you back?
Yep, I'm back.
And what college are you going to, Drew? Darn it. Anyways, Drew is going to college. He lives in Mount Carmel, Illinois. I did not get to ask him what college he's going to. Maybe I could look that up on his Facebook real quick. But, anyways, I'd just like to thank Drew for coming on. I'm going to talk to him after the podcast. And anyways, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to the Let's Talk Fishing podcast. Guys, the Let's Talk Fishing podcast was brought to you tonight by Grant Rods, Crusher Lures, and the American Bass Club. Again, my name is Jay Angel. I'd like to thank everybody for putting up with our technical difficulties. But anyways, we got some great information from Drew Gill, collegiate bass pro. And you know what? I wish he was here. I wanted to say, well, congratulations on your 3rd place finish in the recent. Look, here I might be able to do it in person. No, maybe not. Darn it. Technical difficulties. You got to love them, guys. Got to love them. You know what? If it wasn't for bad luck, this sounds like one of those days when I'm trying to fish and right one of the last times I go out in the year and I can't buy a bite. Well, I can't buy any good luck today either. So anyways, thank you very much for tuning into the Let's Talk Fishing podcast. Again, my name is Jay Angel. A very special young man, Drew Gill. And guys, you know what? It's Thursday night. Go fishing this weekend. Go hunting this weekend. Have some fun. You only get to do this once. My name is Jay Angel, and I am signing off.